Yeah, and so I think now we're gonna get into another kind of exciting thing to talk about. We're gonna talk about management. Yeah.
Oh my god. Speaking of Firefall.
Right. I think like uh, it's like it's easy to kind of blame management because because in some ways like they tend to be a very visible part of the project, but I think on the flip side is like you know when you become management you should have some responsibility.
I'll be right back. A quick second.
Sure. Basically kind of the idea that you should have some responsibility for how things go. um so one of the things that one of the things they mentioned in the article is that essentially like it felt like the management sometimes learned the wrong lessons essentially. um where the previous game, Dragon Age Inquisition, kind of had a very similar life cycle, development cycle, as Anthem did. But basically, it was a successful game, and so kind of the idea being that, oh well, we kind of went through this really shitty process, but we made a great game, so it's okay. We can forgive those sins. Um, and kind of like and then the next game after that, Mass Effect Andromeda, was seen as basically kind of an aberration, where they did kind of the same thing. They had a very long development process. They had um, they had a very long development process. They had uh, kind of very troubled development, and basically like it didn't feel like things kind of like came together until the very end. Um, and so kind of the idea of there's the idea that um, uh, it was okay to do these things. Basically this thing they called the Bioware magic. Well, at some point, everything's just going to gel together, and we're all going to pull together as a team, and it's going to result in this wonderful game. Um, and basically, kind of like the Dragon Age Inquisition game, kind of like reinforced this. And so you kind of learn kind of the wrong thing. And I think that like when you have a vested interest in basically seeing success, it's easy to write off failures. I mean, and this is like one of the big things a lot of times when people talk about when you talk about creative work and startups, is that sometimes failure can be a really important thing. Especially for startup companies, like if you're trying something new and different, you know, it's expected you're going to fail. And in healthy environments, there's the attitude that your failure is not seen as a stain. It's seen as as a learning process. As long as you learn from that process, as long as you don't, as long as you kind of like are able to look at it and say, okay, X Y Z went wrong. Let's make sure we don't do that again.
Learning.
Right.
Sorry.
Imagine that, like, and again, like I think this is something that kind of falls a lot more on people in the trenches, because the managers are the ones that have the experience to kind of should be able to look at that and say, no, this was a wrong thing, this is a bad thing, this is this went completely off the rails.
Well put together,
Now get out there and therefore therefore we should and this is something unexpected. The management should be the ones that kind of guide people into in basically to do the right thing. But I mean sometimes just that doesn't happen because again there's if there's a reason for people to want to bury their head in the sand and ignore basically what happened.
Okay, we just need one more nightmare.
Let's get back to it.
Let me find another nightmare. Oh wait, I found me.
You are a nightmare.
I am.
Confirm.
Confirmed. Oh wait, that's not what I wanted. Okay.
Give me one moment. I know. It's so terrible.
See, this is why we need management.
I think like one of the interesting things they talked about a lot, like again, this is one of those things where it's really hard to to predict this very well, in that there's a lot of management turnover. And so when you have a lot of management turnover like that, you tend to lose the people that were the ones that basically you kind of lose the people who basically were the ones that were the ones that should be have the steady hand that kind of keep things going. And so when you have that, when you have that turnover, and this happens like and the reason it's important, I think it's important to look at the reason why the management turned over. I mean, the article didn't really go into this very much, but I think that part of the issue you kind of you look at here is that basically why does management turn over? And I got a lot of times they kind of going back to the idea of like the certain types of programmers that are lauded are the people that kind of like can do basically be very spontaneous. You can basically go and fight fires and so like you tend to kind of like turn through people, the kind of this slow and steady type of people.
Yeah.
Those people tend to kind of burn out, and basically you're bringing cowboys who and so like I think a lot of times with game development, you kind of want to look at how do you encourage teams to stick together.
Money.
Well, not just money, but I think a good working environment, and like a lot of I think a lot of like the there's been some basically some shows that basically some kind of studies and whatnot that show that like money is important. Like not being paid, essentially not being paid enough is bad. That makes people unhappy. But being paid more does not necessarily make people more happy.
Right.
You need to kind of make sure that people are paid a sufficient amount to meet their needs,
so that they're not distracted from
right
their work.
Exactly, so they don't have to they're not worrying about kind of like
their day-to-day lives.
Right. But if you start paying them more than they really need, this doesn't make up for other sin.
But America.
But capitalism.
Yeah, exactly. No, like when I was reading the article, because I actually did read the article.
Wow.
I know. In their description of the management, my response was, "Wow, I didn't know I ran a game company."
Right. Yeah, I mean, like you joke about this, but like I mean, to be honest, like there is a real problem with kind of like terrible management practices, terrible project management, just and leadership. Like kind of going back to the kind of what we talked about with the design, like there being no real keeper of the vision.
Mm-hmm.
this is something that, you know, like, you just can't, you should expect that someone's going to have the authority and the responsibility for setting a direction and moving people in that direction. And it's not like nobody, you know, either nobody's empowered to do this, or nobody, you know, felt confident enough to do this, or, you know, like, for whatever reason, this was not happening.
Yeah, I felt like there were a couple of, the article brought up some questions that it didn't necessarily provide answers to with that.
Well, I think so, you know, for some of this, it kind of depends on, it kind of depends on, you know, basically kind of like what you know, like, management responded in order to really kind of give you answers to this. And it was pretty obvious that the management was not interested in participating in this article. You know, they basically have a little addendum saying that, you know, like, BioWare posted up a response. You know, they basically kind of like made it basically kind of sounded like, you know, because they kind of complained about, like, the article kind of tearing down creative work, and it was like one of those things. It was like, they're not tearing down a creative work.
They're keeping an accountability.
Right. Basically, they're kind of saying, we heard there's a problem. Like, is this the way, you know, things should work? But yeah, I think that, you know, like, because I think like one of the major problems you run into, and again, like, this is the same drum that I've been beating a lot, is the kind of the idea of crunch as part of the ethos. Like, you know, the whole BioWare magic thing they talked about in the article. And I want to talk about crunch as a separate topic in a bit, but, you know, like, but, you know, when management, you know how this impacts management is when management starts to kind of rely on crunch as part of the development cycle, or, you know, for whatever reason, because it's more efficient, because, you know, it builds teams together. You know, you really have. We're done with nightmares, aren't we?
Yeah, this is this other guy. So,
yeah. But so when you have, like, you know, when you have, you know, management that kind of buys into crunch as part of the ethos, and they even talk about it being like, you know, this is the magic sauce for the studio. I mean, that's really fucking toxic, to be perfectly frank. I mean, and again, it kind of makes up, it kind of like, it tries to hide the fact that, you know, management wasn't managing, management wasn't leading, and there was no vision, kind of, you know, and project management is, like, you know, treated as this mysterious black art that nobody can understand.
Black magic.
Right, exactly. I think that, you know, I think one of the things you look at, like, especially with the kind of the extended pre-production, is that, you know, like, you kind of need some sort of, like, you know, freedom to experiment, to kind of find a direction. But the flip side of that, though, is that you
need direction.
Right. I mean, you know, you need deadline, really, when it comes down to it. Oh, we're doing rest. Sorry. Let me actually go get some good care.
Yeah. Rescue first.
Yeah. And so, you know, you need deadlines. You know, like, and that's kind of like what management is good for, because when you talking about the creative process, like, one of the things I've heard, and I really like this idea, this concept, is that, you know, the idea that a creative work is not so much finished as abandoned. You know, you have this creative thing, and you know, you're never, as a creative person, you're never going to be like, okay, this is completely, like, there's nothing else I can do to this to possibly improve it. Because, yeah, as a creative person, you know, like, you're always improving. Ideally, you should always be improving. You should always be, you know, becoming better. And so, you know, even during the duration of a project, you might look at something and say, oh, I'm going to, you know, the things you notice at the beginning of a project are going to be different than things you kind of notice at the end of a project.
I was one tile off from finishing the hack, and then I got dead.
So it just happens. And so yeah, so basically, you know, the idea being that you're always going to want to pour more effort into a creative work, and basically that kind of goes for games and game development as well. And that's kind of where management comes in. Management should be the one to kind of drive and say, no, we need to get this done on a proper schedule. You know, we need to do X, Y, Z, and and ideally, it should be kind of an interplay between the developers and the management to where management basically kind of they said, okay, well, we need to go this direction. The developer's saying, well, but we also need to do this.
Right, there needs to be a conversation.
Right, and again, and kind of keep in mind that again, like leaders are the leaders for a reason. Sometimes they need to push a little harder to get the best results out of people.
No.
Give me a weapon. No. I want you to stay out of the line of fire.
No, we are the management here. We're saying no.
Oh, exactly. This is a perfect example. We need to get to the exit, but I want to fight. No. You do not get to fight. We're getting to the exit. That's the goal here. You can go fight on your own time.
But Dad, I need Vela in here. But Dad. Did it not count me? It didn't count me. Yay!
Yeah, and so I think that you need good management. Like I can't, I'm not kind of this complaining and looking at these things. I think it's unfair to say management is not useful, that management has no purpose, or management ruin things, only ruins things. They have an important part to play. I think just too often in game development,
bad management ruins things.
Yeah, I mean, like if you look at how managers are. Essentially how managers are promoted, it's basically the people that kind of work up through, a lead programmer is the type of person basically that was hot shit and alpha enough to impress other programmers, was hot shit and impressive enough to to impress other programmers to start working as a programmer. And as they get basically as they get more experience, eventually at some point they're like, well, we're gonna have other people learn from you. And so we don't necessarily pick from the pool of people that are good at teaching, that are good at understanding, that are good at critiquing. We just kind of like, oh, you're a programmer, and you're a decent enough programmer.
This is Spy, by the way.
Oh.
You just want me to handle the points?
Yeah, you can go do that.
Okay,
just try not to die.
Don't die. And it's just us.
You have a ton of shields, yeah. Should have interrupted me and stopped my blathering to tell me that he gets himself.
I hate interrupting you when you're on a roll.
Fair, but but yeah, the managers should be basically we should be picking people based on their ability to lead, more than just their ability to basically survive long enough in the industry, which, don't get me wrong, is kind of an impressive thing sometimes.
But lone wolves can survive just as well.
Right, and these type of people basically getting, B is the tower, but yeah, and so and I've had to work with kind of these terrible type of programmer managers. who were the basically the type that were basically just promoted because they've been in the industry for a long time, not because they have. I mean, because they theoretically have some competence at programming, not necessarily because they're good leaders. And I've had to work with people that are frankly terrible leaders, people that basically like do a lot more harm than good, to be frank.
They don't know how to encourage people. They don't know how to
Right.
incentivize. They don't know how to communicate.
Right. Or even just something basic like how to offer constructive criticism.
Or take it.
Well, I mean, in theory, they should be giving more than taking, but yes, but you're exactly right. Like they should be able to guide junior programmers, and so like junior programmers that have terrible managers become programmers that become terrible managers. To be frank,
because they don't have a.
Because they've never seen what a good manager looks like. And so and this kind of goes down the line where you don't have good project managers because like project management has never been anything that's been seen as important to to the company, to the developer.
But it's extremely important.
Right. I mean, like this is what kind of keeps things on track. I like a lot of companies tend to kind of follow this concept called agile programming. The kind of the core of agile being kind of what's called sprints, where you kind of do stuff that basically has a very short development cycle, usually measured in weeks. And the idea being that I already did the lock for that, by the way. So
yeah, I stopped myself just in time.
And so basically you get kind of people that agile is basically about doing these sprints. Those are basically like things that are going to be done in a couple weeks, and so you spend a couple weeks doing whatever it takes to get this aspect done. Reporting to what's called a scrum master. To basically give updates and basically then report like, oh, I'm slowed down because I need X. They won't even know it's gone. Or like I'm doing well, I'm on target. Giving basic regular status reports, and then at the end of the sprint, you kind of look at what you've done. And so this is basically like something that would have potentially helped Anthem. I mean, the irony here, of course, is like a lot of game companies do, say they do agile, but they basically they kind of like mimic a lot of the kind of the behaviors, but not without really understanding the importance of why they're doing what they're doing. And so, but imagine like the pre-production process. They could have been like, okay, we're going to take 2 weeks to figure out flying. And then at the end of that, we're going to determine whether or not we're going to put flying in. And then we're going to basically stick with that. And so generally, when you do a sprint, it's like super focused. We're going to focus entirely on this aspect.
This jar is saying a whole bunch of words that I don't understand.
Let me... Cargo cult management. Yeah.
I'm glad you get the jokes.
I'll translate. Right. Dejara says, I'm assuming the article is unbalanced against the management, probably because they didn't talk to management. I mean, I think the management didn't talk to the article writers. On the other hand, the blame always goes upward, and I agree completely with that. I talk a lot about not just authority for leadership, but responsibility. I think and at the end of the day, the responsibility, needs to be at the management level. No matter what the complaint is, if the people doing the development weren't good enough, then somewhere along the lines, the management, who are generally in charge of the hiring process, generally in charge of the hiring process, kind of fell down somewhere along the lines. um, Dejar talked about the Peter principle, which is kind of this idea that you're promoted to your level of incompetence.
Nice.
So say basically you're a programmer, and you're you get hired as a programmer. You're really great, and they promote you to lead programmer, so they give you more responsibility. Excuse me. And so you get more responsibility because you're a lead programmer, and then so they just keep on promoting you. But at some point you get to the point where you're in over your head, and usually that gets to the point where basically you have to manage other people.
Right.
And so so basically what happens a lot of times is you get people promoted to the position where they have to manage other people, but they're just terrible at it. And it's not necessarily just that people are bad at it, but generally, especially in the game industry, we get no training for leadership. I mean, that's one of the big things I wanted for my last job is I wanted to have. I was talking to the head of the studio, and I said, I want to learn leadership. You have led a company. I want to learn leadership. I explicitly said this, and it was just one of my biggest frustrations of the whole thing was I never got that. I never got the opportunity to lead to leadership, and but that's what happens a lot. The senior people, I mean, often they don't even really understand what they're doing for leadership. Especially if you get the really charismatic people.
Mm-hmm.
The really charismatic people are not necessarily going to be the type that basically understand what they're doing. Scrum is the waterfall agile approaches. I'm gonna leave that alone because that's gonna take way too long to describe.
We'll talk about it off stream. It's fine.
Right. I can go into that. It's a very deep joke, and Dejara, I can appreciate that, but I'm not gonna explain that in a limited amount of time. But the last thing you talked about is cargo cult management, and this is the idea of this is basically the Bioware magic, essentially. We've done this in the past and it worked, therefore we're going to do this, not because we know that this is the best way to do it, but because it worked in the past and we're just going to keep on doing it.
Nice.
And kind of the idea of being the cargo cults were basically the Pacific Islanders during World War II, where basically planes would fly over and drop supplies.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the natives would basically go and find the supplies, and then so basically they'd find this cargo, and it'd be all this really great stuff they've never seen before, and it was really amazing. And so they saw these great metal birds in the sky, not to be too offensive here, but and they didn't really understand it. So basically they started copying things to try to get the birds to fly over and drop more things for them.
Right.
And so so for example, they might see that the airplanes fly over a landing strip, so we're going to make a landing strip. and again, having no understanding about how having very little understanding about what a landing strip does, why it works, what's necessary for it. But with the idea of them basically, if we do this, we'll get more stuff from the sky.
Oh, I might be FASPA again. Right. It's instinctive.
So right. Yeah. Well, I mean, basically, it's just copying something because it worked.
Right.
I mean, it's just purely this kind of a thing. No thought, no understanding, no consideration. And again, the whole Bioware, what they call the Bioware magic thing was if we just crunch and it will all come together in the last moment, because that's what happened before.
I might have doomed this all.
I just had to res all of you.
Still working on it.
Yeah, I have to do antimatter drop when I'm FASPA. It's fine. Everything's fine.
But yeah, so basically,
I gotcha.
Yeah, and I mean, this is basically kind of management doing what management does poorly. And again, I think another couple of ideas that kind of scared me from the article, basically this idea of silo effects. where they talked about like there being the real BioWare, which was the Edmonton offices, I think it was.
Yeah, yeah. And then Austin was the B team, and
right,
Montreal
and
was
then
C
like
team.
whatever was the additional thing was the C team. Kind of.
Oh my god. Oh yeah, go res the. Hey, you fucker.
Did I not? I'm sorry, I thought I got you.
It's fine. I'll just release whatever.
I was trying to talk and actually provide content for the podcast. I'm sorry.
See, that's where you went wrong.
Yeah, just trying to entertain people and do my job instead of playing politics. I mean that's a whole other thing we can talk about, like basically politics. But but basically this kind of this idea of siloing, like is a really dangerous. Like there was like these different teams, like, oh, if you work over here, you're the real BioWare, and these people are the fake BioWare, and we don't need to listen to them because they have no idea what they're doing.
Even though they're more experienced in what we're doing.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Like like again, and this kind of goes back to my my idea of kind of like what I was talking about before, kind of like a general lack of a respect for experience. Like basically like, a lot of times you get kind of this short-sightedness. This idea of short-sightedness, where basically they will come res me.
I am.
Yeah.
It didn't go instant.
I didn't see you near me. Kind of the short-sightedness, basically, where like in the short term, it's very profitable to churn through people. I made the joke before. Like I had this friend that basically said, like, game development's the way it is because there's an infinite supply of 24-year-olds. There's an infinite supply of kids that think that it's cool to make games, so therefore I will sacrifice and I will cut and I will bleed to be able to be given a chance to prove myself. But then all of a sudden when life situations change, and all of a sudden you want things like a life, family, a house, and I'm not even joking,
right.
I think I mentioned before that there's a when I worked at 3DO, there was someone won an award for missing the birth of their second child.
Right.
Because instead of basically taking time off work, the project was due, and so they made the decision to basically just leave their wife at the hospital to have the kid while they basically were in the studio working.
Which that's god awful.
Well, I mean, this is kind of like the type of thing that these types of games kind of encourage. These type of practices encourage. They encourage people to kind of like make these decisions because whatever, blah blah blah, wife, but you need to be a team player.
Right.
And so I think one other thing I kind of wanted to talk about was kind of the idea of this random idea of them wanting a memeable game.
Oh yeah. A rare cache.
Nice.
I didn't get anything.
And so, they didn't want people to be able to make fun of the game
because of the memes from Andromeda.
Mass Effect Andromeda. So
does someone to get the payload?
I don't see anything.
Nobody has it.
Oh, this is exciting.
Walkers incoming.
It's this is a complete, a seemingly very random thing for them to want. to basically say, oh, we want this, we don't want to be the victim of memes. I don't see anything at the old system.
Oh my god, did it disappear again? Oh, somebody had it.
Okay.
This will take a moment.
But
yeah,
that's like saying we don't want to be on the internet. Like,
well, I mean, yeah, or like, tension. Like, it's like, yeah, you're gonna get negative tension. Sorry, like.
Especially with that attitude.
Right, and like so the problem you run into is like if you focus on not getting negative tension, that essentially you're what that essentially means is you're not focusing on being good, you're focusing on not being bad.
Right. That's. Oh, never mind. I just gave myself like a PTSD flashback. Never mind. I was gonna make a comparison to like bullying, but.
Right.
Like you don't focus on like not being bullied because that would just make you a target for bullying.
Right.
Same effect.